welcome to the Overlanding podcast, the original podcast dedicated to vehicle-dependent travel. I'm your host, Andy Smith, and throughout the series I'll be chatting with adventurous people who have chosen to travel the world by bicycle, motorcycle, car and truck. The aim of the podcast is to discover what motivates people to embark on life-changing journeys and to hear some incredible stories along the way. In this slightly shorter episode, I talk with Graeme and Luisa Bell from A2A Expedition. Graeme and Luisa, along with their two kids, Keelan and Jessica, have been on the road in their Land Rover Defender since 2012. The Bells are currently holed up in Florida, where their Landy is getting a serious makeover before the guys head to Europe next month. In this podcast, we discuss travelling as a family, keeping it real, and the trials and tribulations of writing, publishing and selling a book. The Skype connection at the beginning of this podcast was a little glitchy. It doesn't last for very long, so please stick with it. It clears up pretty quickly. So without further ado, let's hear what they've got to say. Hi, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Joining me around the virtual campfire. As like many guests before you, I'm sure you're going to impart some wisdom onto the podcast. You guys don't really need. Yeah, you guys don't really need too much of an introduction, really, because you're kind of fast becoming the kind of I don't know how to say this. There are certain people within the motorcycle community which are kind of the go-to people who are seen as the kind of font of all knowledge and have quite a prominent kind of online kind of persona, I guess. And you guys are fast becoming the kind of 4x4 versions of what has existed in the motorcycle world for a long time.
That's lovely to hear.
Well, it's interesting, and it's something I'd like to talk about, really. Because you've been on the road now for how long?
We started overlanding seriously in 2010, and then we took we drove up around Africa for a bit. Time to sell everything we owned and give up on our normal lives, and then hit in 2012 again. And since then, it's been non-stop. Luisa went back to South Africa for a month with Keelan in 2014, but other than that, we've been on the go since essentially 2012.
Yeah.
And to go right back to the very beginning then, what kind of possessed you to kind of up and leave and sell all your possessions? Had you had an inkling this was the kind of thing you wanted to do before you set off, or had you done smaller trips?
Well, I think both Graeme and I had travelled when we were younger with our folks, and then I backpacked for a year when I was just out of school, and Graeme did the same. So, you know, when we met each other, I was kind of settling down, trying to make a career, and it just kind of from there just carried on, normal life. And then one day my father always wanted to travel, and when he passed away, he had a bit of an opportunity to see everything, and we were like, to hell with it. If we have to wait until retirement to see something, we might be dead by then, so dead or broke. So we said, let's hit the road. There was no excuse, and with the kids, it was a great opportunity because we were working so hard, we were spending so little time seeing our children that we realized it was more important.
Yeah.
I always kind of believed that I was destined for a life that was a little bit less than ordinary. And after 15 years of living an ordinary life, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of it. This isn't what I envisaged my life was going to be. Just being a corporate slave. Another word, and this was a great opportunity for me to do something special with my life and with my children.
Yeah.
And I think that was a major part of it. For me, I was sick and tired of dropping my kids off at school every day and handing them over to people I didn't care much for. I wanted to be the major influence in my children's life, and I actually wanted to be the main educator. And being able to overland has given me everything that I was missing in my life, essentially.
Yeah.
That's not too much of a dissimilar story to myself and my wife, actually. We would, if the opportunities arise and you're in a position where you can do it, kind of get on with it. And I think it's sad that a lot of people kind of make excuses not to do it. And one thing you mentioned there is, you do have kids, and for a lot of people, I think that is an excuse almost for people not to do it. And we've seen, while we've been on the road, we've met many people who are travelling with kids, and a whole range of kids, from really tiny little babies right through to kind of obnoxious teenagers. I like the fact that you took your kids with you, and they've been on the road for such a long time. And I recorded a recent podcast with Kirsty. I always pronounce her surname wrong. I say Lamore, but apparently it's Lama.
Really?
Yeah, I prefer Lamore. It's kind of French and sexy.
Yeah.
But
it sounds lovely.
I know, and I said it very tentatively as well because I still think it's not right. But anyway, she took a year out with her kids and took them overlanding, and we recorded a whole podcast about how it was beneficial to the kids. You've obviously been on the road for quite a long time with the kids. What kind of role do you think it's played in their kind of development? Because they're both becoming, I think your son now is how old is he? Must be like 17, 18, right?
Yeah, he's 17, going on to 18 this year, and Jessica's 12. She's more like 21. But the role that it plays, I think it's made them better kids, firstly, and they can talk to anybody from any walk of life, from your poorest to your poor to the CEO of a massive multi-corporation. No qualms about being embarrassed, or having to fit in. And I think that's vital in this day and age. I think kids are just, thrown into the deep end, and then, like Graeme says, they got the schools and the kids, the peer pressure to kind of perform or mold themselves into something that they're not really at the end of the day.
It's made them very well-rounded people, I think. I mean, they can communicate in 4 languages. Okay, Jessica can barely communicate in one. It's Instagram. No, I'm just being nice. Keelan's great with languages. Jessica's great with communicating with animals. But, they've learned so many different skills, and they've learned what's possible, what's impossible. They've learned skills that they would normally not have learned, and I think it's really molded them, and they're getting to meet people of every shape, color, size, and relate to these people. So their worldview is much larger than I think most children's are. And they get to meet people in their own environments and see what cultures really are like, and that can only be good for them in the future, I believe.
Yeah. It's good. You mentioned one thing there which I picked up from a previous podcast, I think, or maybe even from your website. I can't remember where I read it, but the whole concept of acquiring new skills, and actually it might have been on one of your crowdfunding pages for your book, I think, where you've thrown yourself into this situation where you're overlanders, and as a result of that you become kind of like publicists, you become your own PR company, you become graphic designers, you become mechanics, you become I don't know, communicators, linguists, all these different kind of skills, which are in themselves an education, which is outside of the realms of a formal education that kids would normally get. How much of a role do your kids play in kind of, I don't know, you're like a well-oiled machine, I guess, because everyone has their roles on an overlanding trip. If Graeme's fixing the car, Luisa may be doing some kind of admin on the website. Do the kids play a role in doing all that stuff as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have space for passengers. Everyone has to, lend a hand. And from the very beginning, when Jessica was tiny, she used to stomp our clothing for us in a bucket with soap and water. So everyone has their job to do around the house. Keelan has got that. He's huge. He's a big guy. He's very strong. He's got that 17-year-old back, so he does all my heavy lifting for me. But he's also the mathematician in the family. So if I need something figured out, or I need something designed, or I need some 3D something done on a computer, then he's the go-to guy. He's our IT guy. So yeah, everyone has their roles in the family, and and we work to our strengths. And I think that is something that I really try to emphasize, is that, you know, different people have different strengths and weaknesses, and if you want to succeed, you have to work to your strengths. And that's what we do. We work to our strengths as much as we can. Being a well-oiled machine, I don't know. I think the roof tent living, you know, when we were slogging it out in South America and in the Amazon and really having a hard time, everyone just kind of banded together and just did what needed to be done, and we all did what, you know. And then you get to America where everyone gets like super lazy. It's like, you know, I don't want to have to pack up the tent. I want to sit on the internet all day, and that's been a bit challenging. But yeah, generally everyone has their own role to play. Luisa's the boss.
Yeah, obviously.
Because you're by being in a vehicle, and you're, just in case any of our listeners don't know your vehicle, you were in a 130 Defender, or is it? Yeah, it's a 130, right? Yeah. So there's 4 of you in quite a confined, tight space, and you, as a family unit, it's very rare that family units spend that much time together. And I certainly noticed. My wife and I don't have kids, but we're forever grateful that we can spend that much time together. For example, we have friends who, you know, have big, hefty careers who see each other for about an hour or 2 hours a day.
That sounds like a great marriage.
Well, yeah, I guess it does. But it's very unusual for a family unit to spend that much time in a confined space. Is that? Do you think that's made you stronger, or are there times when it's just a massive pain in the ass?
In the beginning, I think it was. Now we're like this little nomadic tribe that floats around in its own little bubble. You know, Luisa and I have worked together since 2005 or something, and that was, for Luisa, that was heaven, because then she didn't have to phone me 500 times a day. I could be attached to her with super glue. And so you work together all day, and then you sleep together at night, and you wake up and you do it all over again. And then with the kids coming on board, I mean, we always, whatever we did with our kids. So being on the road, yeah, it's a bit of a tight space, but you know what interests me is that after an 8-hour drive where we're all sitting in this small space, and we go through the revolutions of laughter, and then and anger, and then quiet, and then laughter and anger and discussion, and you know, and at the end of the day we'll find a campsite of some sort, you know, get there and pull out, and then the kids will be like there under your feet, and I'm like, go, there's all this space, you've been right next to me the whole day, what are you doing? You know, under my feet. But the kids are like, oh, well, you know, that's what they're used to. They're next to mommy and they're next to daddy. And
I mean, they still want to share the bed, you know. They'll like their independence. When we, like, say, for instance, house sit, you know, they will try and get a place where they each have their own space, but they inevitably gravitate toward each other or towards us, and we'll all end up sharing the same space again, regardless of how large the house is.
I mean, we were, for almost 4 years we were in that roof tent. One roof tent. It was the largest roof tent you could get. And it's 2.4 meters by 2.4 meters when it's open, which is okay when the kids are small. But now, but anyway, so almost 4 years we were cheek by jowl in that tent, and then in the Landy, which, like you said, is not exactly the roomiest place to be. But hey, you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. We're a family, and I think it's the old school what a family used to be. You know, in the old days where you lived out on the farm and you were in the mountains and you'd chop wood and work together, and everyone had to pull in and to take care of the animals and do whatever. You know, that's how family units used to operate. It was never this independent thing where, you know, you hardly ever see each other and you never really communicate.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it's in this day and age, I think it's something that we should all strive towards. Really, I guess it's that sense of family unit and working together is a valuable kind of commodity, I think, and I think it's kind of commendable. But how do you find it now that the kids are turned into teenagers? Has it got to a point where they want more independence, or are they still happy to continue the way they've been going?
No, they're happy to continue, and Keenan is like we were saying is turning 18 this year, and generally in our, in South Africa, in our society, we would, be out the house by 18 at least. The parents would be booting us out, and he's like, hell no, I'm not going anyway. So
yeah, you're 18, you finished high school, you go off to university, and then you go start your life. That's how it works. And so I put a bit of pressure on the boy because it's very easy to get lazy, the lazy overlanders. And it's very easy to get complacent. And I'm saying to him, and I actually woke up one morning and realized, hang on a second, soon I don't have to pay for this guy anymore. Legally, I'm not obligated. So I motivate him by saying, well, you've got a year to choose. You can work with us. Yeah. You can take photos. You can help us with the website. You can do video. You can be part of the team, like a real functioning, as in we wake up, we work together, we all achieve goals together kind of team. Or I can send him off to university, whatever he decides. Now is the time to decide, which I think is difficult for any 17-year-old, is to know what they're going to do with the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
But he's quite happy to be with. He's talking about getting his own Defender, and I'm telling him he's going to have to bloody well pay for it.
Yeah.
So I think if Keelan has his way, he'll be with us until
he
whenever.
meets the right one.
And then Jessica's the same. And I always joke, but it's quite serious and it's quite true. I really believe that the only thing that's really going to break this family unit is a romance. I'm not even... Dude, okay, I'll tell you this. Keelan was 14. We were in Salta, Argentina. And we had a fuel pump problem which delayed us for a month, and we were stuck in Camping Zamina. And we moved to this other campsite, and Keelan met this girl through the kids that lived there. You know how it goes. The last day we finally got the engine fixed and everything. It was kind of like that scene in What's Eating Gilbert Grape when the old lady eventually fixes the truck. And we take him to say goodbye to this girl, and he goes up to the apartment. We're sitting outside, and he's gone for 10 minutes. And I turn to Louise and I go, did we just let our teenage son go into an apartment alone with this girl? And I'm like, beep, 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 hoot, hoot, hoot. And we drove off, and he was like a little bit quiet in the back seat. And we got up to Kukui, and he turned in to us and said, Dad, if you could just drop me off here, I'll take one of the bicycles and some clothing, and I'm going to go back. And I'm like, how old is he? 14,
yeah,
15?
Almost 15, yeah.
I'm like, you're 15. What are you going to do? I'll make a plan. Okay. Yeah. So we kind of had to say, okay, well then, are you going to work? What are you going to eat? Okay, once we mentioned food, and you kind of realized, hang on, there's not going to be food. Then we kind of managed to retain him. But this is what's going to happen. We're going to be in some town and somewhere in the world, and he's going to fall in love, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to extract him.
Yeah.
Especially if you've had some time to build a real relationship. So that's probably what's going to break up the old family unit.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because I should imagine a lot of people who do kind of take kids on overland trips, they don't do that transition. They either go when the kids are really young, or go for a couple of years, like a planned couple of years. Like your trip is kind of extended, because I don't think you have any plans to stop anytime soon, right? So I'd kind of like the fact that it's kind of organic, because you're always going into the unknown, because things obviously change. Like if he decides to stay there someday, then your whole setup is going to have to change, and how you work and the dynamic is going to change. And I kind of like that kind of changes on a daily basis, I guess, and dealing with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm rebuilding the land here. Well, not kind of rebuilding. I'm kind of restoring as I go, but the main idea is to change her from a rooftop tent, double cab, set up to a live-in camper with a pop top, with open access from the rear to the front. And the whole idea there is that the boy's just getting too big. He doesn't fit in the vehicle. Yeah. He's grown up in that back seat, so he knows how to squeeze himself into the crevices. But he describes
it's like a hermit crab.
Yeah. Chris Scott, who wrote the Overlanders Handbook, approached us to do just a little profile on the kids, and Keelan wrote something about, what was it about the vehicle?
Oh, it was pros and cons.
Pros and cons. He's like uncomfortable seats and this idea. So he's been sitting on that hard bench for a long time now. So the idea is to change it up a bit so we all have a bit more space and a bit more comfort. We've been outdoors for a long time now. I mean, we've done a bit of house sitting in the last year, which has taken us out of the tent. But before that, I mean, essentially we lived outside for every day of our lives.
Yeah. That idea of spending extended periods on the road, like my wife and I were 853 days, I think, a majority of which were in the roof tent. And every now and then you have to slow down. It becomes very tiring moving every day. And you said you've been house sitting. Was that purely just to take a break?
It was to refill the gas tank financially, essentially.
Yeah.
We were broke by the time we got back from Alaska. And we had some major opportunities come our way. That's maybe another story for another day. But we essentially, our South African rand had lost 40 to 50% of its value since we left home. Our business had been, we'd sold it, and we came to the end of our contract of earnings. And there was essentially, we were like, now what do we do? We desperately want to keep on traveling, but how do we do it? And it's that conundrum that everyone has. How do we do this? How do we make money and keep going? And our first book was very well received, but I don't think we had the experience to market it properly. And I was hoping it would become this, this overnight bestseller, but that doesn't happen, does it? Especially if you're not the greatest writer on earth. But then Luisa came up with this Kickstarter idea, and we found this place, this ranch up in the mountains of Baja to take care of. And it was supposed to be a 6-month gig, but it was completely secluded. We were hours away from anyone. And Luisa convinced me to do this Kickstarter, and we did it, and that certainly helped. We got a lot of exposure out of it. We got a lot of sales out of it, and it really gave us the impetus we needed to prepare for the next leg, which is now the Europe to Asia part.
By doing that as a Kickstarter campaign, I think your book has been very well received, and it certainly raised the entire profile of your trip to some degree. And just to go back to kind of monetizing, that's the dream, isn't it? Is to monetize what you do so you can continue doing what you do, basically. And I've spoken to a lot of people who've written books or who are trying to find ways to do this. And I think one thing that's became really apparent, especially since we got back to the UK, there's a whole circle of people, especially in London, who are not necessarily within the overlanding scene, but certainly under the umbrella of adventure travel. There's a lot of cyclists, a lot of people who are doing kind of crazy canoeing expeditions and all kinds of stuff. And they've seemed to have maybe not mastered it, but are certainly on the road to becoming quite successful at it. But the one thing I've really noticed is that then the person who's undergoing those kind of trips then becomes almost a brand. And a lot of these people are kind of now finding ways to outdo each other that become almost almost as a bit tacky, really. Like, for example, there's maybe I heard a story of a guy who was trying to unicycle around the world, and do you know what I mean? Just take a bike with 2 wheels, and it becomes less about the travelling and more about a personal challenge, and then making it a business, because from that, obviously, he gets a lot of promotion, which then lifts the profile, which means he can go on and do something else. But I think there's an interesting... I think it's important to find the balance, and I think that's something that you guys have done really successfully, because you've kind of shown to people that you can do this with kids. And not only can you do it with kids, here's a book which can then tell you how to do it if you want to do it yourself. And it's really quite clever, because as a result of that, it's helped fund and continue your travels. So I think you have to be very sensitive in kind of, I don't know, how you approach monetizing your travels, I guess. And I think you guys have really nailed it.
Essentially, our expenses are very low.
Yeah.
And you must always keep that in mind. So and I try and get them lower and lower and lower all the time. Like this idea of doing the rebuild, so that we can wild camp in all kinds of places, and we can really just get the most out of every single dollar that we have. And that's an important thing to remember, is that obviously you can do this quite cheaply. You can do it. It's I mean, I know people who go back home with more money than they started, if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much. I mean, the idea is, and I get what you're saying, where everyone's trying to outdo each other and everyone's trying to, be more extreme. And then you got these guys who do this clickbait kind of headlines like, oh, I was homeless for a year.
Yeah.
I didn't spend, I had no money and all this kind of crap. And I'm like, I'm not going to fall into that trap. We're not going to be sensationalist about what we do, because I think what we do is already quite sensational. We've got the 2 kids and we're educating them. We're reinventing ourselves. We don't have to pretend that it's more than what it is, because humbly, it is pretty fantastic. It's a different way of life. I often think it'd be so much easier to just be back home, running that business that we did, and suffering through the rest and recuperation and the daily showers and all that normal shit that goes with being normal.
Having money in the bank.
Having money in the bank. And then there's that at the end of next month there's going to be more money in the bank, and then not like this insecure lifestyle we lead. But essentially, I suppose it comes down to, what do they say? Success is if you can do what you love is your career. You make money doing love. And I've tried to rack my brains trying to come up with a new, exciting, interesting way of monetizing this whole thing. And I'm going to find it one day. But essentially what we have is ourselves, and we have what we're learning, and we're not pretending to have to be the be-all and end-all. I mean, if you have to re-travel the planet overland, it's quite tongue-in-cheek in many cases. We make fun of ourselves and the mistakes we've made, and it's all part of a learning process. But it's like that conversation you have with yourself when at the end of something like this, or in the middle of it, you go, if only I could go back then and sit myself down and have a beer and just tell myself, do it like this, do it like that. If only I knew then what I know now. It's that kind of a situation.
And I think it's one thing you mentioned right at the very beginning of that was kind of getting the most out of your buck, getting the most out of it, the dollar, and eking it out. And I read something recently that really interested me, and it was something I could relate to, because when we were saving for our trip, we kind of gave ourselves incentives to help save. And obviously here in England, we're pounds and pence. We basically did calculations to establish that it would essentially cost about 25 pence to travel a mile around the world before we left. And that was enough to kind of incentivize us to save. If we go to the supermarket, I'm not going to buy that Mars bar, because that Mars bar there stands for 3 miles in the future. So I'm not going to buy that Mars bar. I don't need it. And that really helped kind of incentivize us to save. And on our trip, again, our trip was a seriously budget trip. My wife and I started out with no savings. We sold everything we owned. We didn't really have a huge amount of money, and we eked it out as much as we could. And one thing that we realized, and something that was kind of confirmed to me just recently when I read it, is that it proportionately, it's better to travel slower. Like when we were traveling, we met so many people who were racing from point A to B. They're going from London to Sydney, and they'd given themselves like 6 months to do it. And to do that same journey over 4 years, or even over a year, it doesn't cost twice as much. Proportionately, you can travel much slower and not spend much more money. So in that regard, it's better to travel slower and really experience the countries that you're in.
And, perhaps a couple, when you've got a hungry teenager on board, I think. Sorry, this was maybe just one. I hope I didn't interrupt. But as 4 people, it's 4 of everything. It's times whatever you're consuming, whatever you need, wherever you're staying. It's 4 times part fees and all that kind of crap. It really starts adding up. I don't know about that. I've heard that theory before. I think with Kun Vibbles from Land Cruising. He had the same theory.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out which one. I don't know.
Well,
we kind of did that the other day, and we've done 125,000 kilometers, more or less, since we left in 2012, and we spent about $1.
More
than $1.
More than $1 a kilometer.
A kilometer.
Okay.
So that's
yeah.
125,000 kilometers over 5 years.
But Graeme also drinks a lot of beer. And
if we were vegetarian teetotalers, we probably would still have. What's the point of that? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you certainly, if you are traveling on a budget, you certainly need to find a happy medium between kind of, enjoying yourself. You don't, because then it's no fun. There's no point in doing it, is it? But
well, the trick is the solution is make your own food.
Yeah.
You can go to a restaurant and pay $25, $40 for a plate of shrimp, or you can go and buy them for $6 a pound, and you can make them yourself the way you like it, and it's a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
And that's really our thing. We don't eat out. We don't go to pubs. We don't go to nightclubs. We don't go to bars.
We don't go to restaurants.
We don't. Yeah. We don't. I mean,
in the States, we've been here for over a year now. Well, between Canada and Alaska and Mexico, and we've been to a restaurant 3 times.
Twice.
And then we didn't even take ourselves.
Yeah. And once with Scott Brady from Overlanding International, he took us to a nice Asian joint.
Thai place.
And so that's about his
Ryan
Ribery took us to Korea. So it's literally like now and then some people say, hey, let's go to a restaurant. We're like, dude, there's 4 of us. I'm not, we don't do restaurants. And if they really like us, they'll go, okay, it's on me. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you really sure?
Right, just to bring it back to your book, because that's something I wanted to talk about a little bit. And at some point in the future, I think I'm going to do a podcast special, which is purely just talking to people about books and kind of how they fund their books and how they go about writing it. Your first book was completely self-published, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We Will Be Free. We did it published on Amazon.
I guess financially, was it successful? And then I guess the other question is, how was it received by the people that read it?
It was. I'm still earning quite a bit out of it from sales. Every month the sales keep going up. It's become a bit of a word of mouth. When we first came into the US, we used our last $500 to print how many? It
was like
a couple of boxes, a couple 100 boxes, and we were heading up to Overland Expo in what was it?
There's one in Arizona. Is it Arizona?
Yeah. What's the name of that town? I love it. Flagstaff. Beautiful place. And we got there and we thought we're going to sell all these books and this is going to be great. And we got there and people were like, and then it snowed all weekend and we couldn't even stand outside with our little books trying to beg people to buy it. And so we left there and we did manage to sell about 40 books, which was a great relief because we got a little bit of our money back and we could actually put some fuel in the tank. And then we came up with the idea, you know what, we're just going to go to car shows around in the States. And have you seen The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith?
No.
Where he's trying to break into the New York, stock market world, and he's got this little kid, and he's got this one dialysis machine, and he's crying in a bathroom because he's lost it all.
Okay, I've not seen that.
We had a few. The Pursuit of Happiness. It's a wonderful movie. We had a couple of those moments. Like, what the fuck are we doing? But then we'd go to Salt Lake City and we'd land up going to the British Field Day, it was called, and we sold $800 worth of books in one day.
Yeah.
And that was, we went and had Wendy's after that. We remember we had a cheeseburger. We're like, we can afford a cheeseburger. that was pretty awesome. And people love the book. I think the cover really helps. It's a really pretty book. It's got a Defender on it, so a lot of people are crazy about that. But the reception has been really good. People. I've had one bad review of the 20 people who have reviewed it, and she was.
And Mills and Boons.
She's since Mills and Boons. Yes, I was very. The family is very courageous, and I only finished reading because I wanted to know what happened. And that was my bad review, and she gave me 1 star.
Yeah. And then I researched, and she was reading Mills and Boons generally, and I was like, well, obviously it's not going to.
We tried to track her down and crack her kneecaps. But
you should have got Keelan to write a chapter about his romance.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she was a Mills and Boons lover.
Yeah.
Got all the bases covered.
Words, but they had the language of love.
Oh.
Yeah. One thing you just mentioned then is because it's got a Defender on the cover, and it's certainly something I've picked up when I've spoken to overlanders who travel by motorcycle. Like the biker scene community is really tight everywhere around the world, and it doesn't matter which country you come from. If you're a biker, other bikers will take care of you. Have you found this the same, because you're a Defender owner, especially in the US? I know they have quite a cult kind of following in the US.
Absolutely, without doubt, absolutely. It's been. I wouldn't travel in any other vehicle. I mean, it's just the community, the Land Rover community is just something else. All the way from South America. People embraced us. We'd go visit the clubs. They'd take us in. They'd help us out with repairs. It's very important for us that we pay our own way. So we're not going to take advantage of anyone. We're not going to let people pay for our stuff and do this kind of thing. But, they'd help us out. They'd give us workshop space. They'd give us somewhere to sleep, cook us a meal. Essentially the Land Rover community has been fantastic in the States as well. More so. I mean, we keep receiving little presents from all around the country.
Yeah, the American people are amazing.
And Canadians.
But in general, it's like, it's an amazing country. It's an easy way to travel.
Well, we're talking about Land Rovers specifically.
Okay, sorry, Land Rovers. Okay. Yes.
So now we're staying with a couple, Ron and Cherie, are they Land Rover owners? And we're staying in their little RV, and they've given me a space to work so I can, work on my Land Rover. Excuse me, we've had people come down. Shane and Sandra from Aussie Overlanders, they drive Defenders. They came down from Fort Lauderdale, and he brought me boxes of nuts and bolts, stainless steel, this and that, and all this kind of stuff that saved me hundreds of dollars. We've had people like Safari Center, Steve Peters, sending us. We've mentioned, hey, we need this part. He sends it to us, like a second-hand part or whatever. But people really just go out of their way to help us out. And it's not that we're got our hands out. I think people respect the way that we're self-sufficient and we're doing everything our own. And I'm not asking anyone to do my welding for me or my designing or any of that work. We do everything ourselves. And I think people like the idea that they can contribute and be part of the journey. And they know when they see us driving in Australia one day that they had a part to play in that.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. I mean, to me, I've always been a very stubborn, insular, introvert kind of guy where community and society hasn't meant very much to me. But this Land Rover community is very, very important to me, very close to my heart.
Yeah. I think it's quite fascinating how people... I think there's a lot of times people live vicariously through you if you're traveling in this way, because there are people who want to travel like this but just can't because of whatever reason, money, finance, house, mortgage, kids, I don't know, whatever reason. And so I think a lot of the time, I initially really noticed it when we left on our trip. We had so many people just contacting us through our website who were just really into what we were doing and not necessarily involved in the overlanding scene, but just kind of found our website through whichever source and then were just really into it. And I think that's quite fascinating. It says a lot about the world, because I think there are a lot of people who would like to do this but can't or won't or will find an excuse not to, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. We get a lot of messages. People say that we inspire them, and we really appreciate that. I mean, to be inspirational is, what more can you ask for?
And I always like it when I see people who've seemingly got it down to a fine art and are doing it the way they want to do it and doing it correctly, if that makes any sense. Like it really pained me when I met people on the road who were traveling like really fast or like
and they were miserable.
Yeah, and you could kind of see that I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess people have different ways of doing things, and there's no right or wrong way of doing it. But certainly for me, I could see other people who were traveling, and I was just thinking I couldn't do it that way. I couldn't do it like that. And I see a lot of similarities between kind of what you guys are doing and how you've done it, and I can see a lot of myself in what you do, which I always like to see that in Overlanders, I guess, because it reassures me to some degree that maybe I'm doing it correctly, or because you never know, do you? And one thing that's popped up across the whole of the series, the website series, is no one really knows what they're doing. Everyone is just winging it. You know, they make it up as they go along, or you know, they run out of money and they find a problem. They have a problem and they find a way to solve it. And
so many people have such different interests. You know, what's important to me, meat and beer and Land Rovers, is not important to other people. Like, I don't give a shit what car I drive. I want to go to Machu Picchu. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone's got a different style of travel, and they just got to, you know, do it the way they do it. And this is one of the things in Travel the Planet Overland, as I take pains to explain to people that they mustn't just run off and buy a fully kitted Land Cruiser with sand ladders and 40-inch tires and roof tents and whatever that everyone tells them they need to have. If what they're actually going to be doing is not going off-roading, they're not going to be going through dunes and that. They're going to be, you know, if they should stick to a van if that's what suits them. So it's very important that people from the beginning, and talking about affordability and all of that, understand what you want to get out of it and how you like to travel.
Yeah.
And then adapt your vehicle accordingly.
Yeah.
Save so much money if you just do it that way.
And keep it simple.
Keep it simple,
Don't have to have amazing water pumps and, you know, the amazing solar systems. Something that keeps you going and keeps you on the road. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I mean, our system originally was a rooftop tent, and I had a water tank that was gravity feed, and 2 fridges, obviously. And that was about it.
That was it.
A drawer system and some packing space, but we really kept it as simple as possible, and it really worked for us, and we saved a hell of a lot of money by going that route. And our style of travel, and I think we've had to learn how to travel the best. You know, what's best for us. What do we enjoy, and we focus on what we need to do. And it takes a long time to figure out how exactly. You know, like you motivate. Why are you doing this? I asked that question in the book as well. When you're going to set off to travel the world, you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do it? You want to impress your friends, or do you actually want to just go and have an amazing adventure? Do you want to? What are your objectives? And sit down and really understand your objectives and how you intend to travel and how much you can afford and what you want to get out of all of this, and then start planning from there.
Yeah. And again, that kind of goes back to when I mentioned all the group of guys in London who were trying to kind of outdo each other, maybe, or you know, they just have different intentions. You know, their intentions are very different to mine. Maybe their end goal is to get more promotion, and so that's the reason why they've done that in that particular way. But and I guess it all fits into the world of overlanding in some way. It's all got its place. There are just so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
But
it's
anyway,
like I don't know if you know this guy. He's a South African adventurer, and he started off doing stuff like canoeing the entire Amazon River and, you know, crossing Antarctica by foot and all this kind of crazy shit. And now you look at him and he's some kind of caricature of what he used to be. He's this guy who shouts and screams and performs in front of a G-Wagon with frickin' drones flying around him. You know, it's like, I'd never want to be that person.
No.
And I'm not pretending to be that person. You know, what we do is adventurous, but it's not that kind of adventure.
That's a lifestyle.
Yeah, and you know, there's a distinction that has to be made.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, I get it. Keep it real. That's kind of
yeah. I think so. Keep it real. Okay, that seems like a natural place to end the conversation, because I'm very aware that you guys have probably got a lot of work to do, and time is money, as they say.
Yeah, it is indeed.
But anyway, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to speak with me and share some of your wisdom. Your website, if people want to check out all your books, and where's the best place to get them?
You can check it out on www.A2, the numeral 2A, and then expedition.com. I always screw that up somehow.
That's another thing, people. When you're setting off on a journey, don't name yourself A2A, for the love of God. What does that mean? It's just so stupid.
Because the Spanish is an A2A.
Exactly. People are like, A2A. It's like, we were trying to be smart. No. Just call yourself Kevin Stacy, go climb a mountain, or something simple like that. But it is A2AExpedition.com, and you can get our books, go buy our books. You can get Travel the Planet. We've got some stock left. It's not going to be an ebook anytime soon.
No.
It can't be an audiobook because it's just, I can't describe the pictures that well. We're going to do another Indiegogo campaign where people can basically do pre-purchasing of the book, and we can do another print run.
Okay, cool.
And then we will be free as either available as an ebook from our site for $5, or they can get the
print book from our website as well.
From our website as well.
Yeah,
cool.
It's also on Amazon, but if you go through Amazon, Amazon makes $19.82, and we make 5 cents.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure I put all the links on our website as well, so that people can find it easily. Perfect. Thank you guys for taking the time. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please contact us and let us know. You can also show your appreciation by subscribing and reviewing us on whatever platform you use. Writing us a review really does help boost our podcast up the listings, which means it reaches more people. We love hearing feedback on how we might improve the show, and we'd like to hear your opinion about what subjects we might cover in future episodes. So please do get in touch via our website, www.theoverlandingpodcast.com. On there you'll also find links to all our social media channels and bonus material relating to each podcast. If you're an overlander yourself and have an interesting story, we would love to hear from you. Email us at aroundtheworldin800days@mail.com. Please like, share, bump and give us a thumbs up along the way. I'm aware we've been a little 4x4 and motorcycle heavy over the past month. We'll be addressing that over the coming weeks as we speak to some inspirational adventure cyclists. They really are quite a hard bunch to pin down and locate. As usual, many thanks for joining us around the campfire. That's it for this week. Goodbye.